I have with me Sindhu Gangadharan, Chairperson of NASSCOM and also Managing Director of SAP Labs. Thank you for speaking to Fortune India. Sindhu, the strategic review report, interesting set of numbers. Of course, growth is back, but slower, and there are various headwinds also that you have sort of enumerated. Uh, Speaking particularly about the changing geopolitical, scenario, is that a greater headwind than you would have anticipated?
Now, first of all, great talking to you, Rukmini, again. And to your question, indeed, right? I mean, today, if you just look at the world around us, there's a lot of things at play, right? We just finished the elections in Germany, as you know, just yesterday, right? New party in power. Similarly, in the US as well, we've seen the changes. But I think for us in India, shows our key strength, right? We have been always a country where we've been able to work very well with the nations of the world, and particularly in tech, that becomes a huge a positive and a huge equalizer, if you ask me, because everybody's looking at India as the nation when it comes to really that young entrepreneurial tech talent who can really build IP. I mean, you've heard it also in the strategic report, where a lot of the work that we are doing here is of course for our nation here, but it's also for the larger world, right? So that, I think, is playing out really well to our advantage. And also, if I just look at the larger geopolitical discussions that's happening, particularly in the world of AI, right? We're seeing Europe on one hand, where they're over-indexed on everything around legal frameworks and data privacy and how data should reside. And then you have the US on the other end playing on over-indexing on innovation. It's all about going out there, profits, top-line growth, all of that. And I think we have that right balance and striking that balance between focusing on innovation, but at the same time also making sure that we build in the right way, right? And not kind of over-indexing on either of this. So I think all in all, it's been playing to our advantage, and we just need to stay focused on our target to really make sure that the talent of the future really understands the domains that we are serving. No?
Sindhu, interestingly, the other thing that caught my eye was, of course, MNCs and homegrown companies are neck to neck, contributing equally to tech services revenue. You are, of course, on the other side of the spectrum, speaking who you represent. Are we looking at times, perhaps by next year, MNCs would be contributing a lot more than Indian companies, homegrown companies, when it comes to revenue of, tech companies out of India?
No, I think rather than looking at who's going to contribute more, what I'm truly looking at and what you're seeing as well is playing to our strengths, right? And if you just look at some of the large scale implementations that we are driving, it's always about co-creation, it's about collaboration. And I think that is clearly the keyword of the future. The ones who are able to work with others, right? And be it services companies working with product companies or the other way around, or with startups, and really bringing all the pieces that is needed to solve the problem at hand. Because sometimes we try to put all these into individual pillars, but I think the real success will happen when we look at the customer at the center, looking at what is it that we are trying to solve, and bringing all elements together in order to solve the problem. And this is where successful companies are absolutely focused on to make sure, and if we all do it the right way, all of these sectors get impacted positively.
Got it. Traditionally, Indian IT services have had this correlation of headcount to revenues. When we are looking at talent, especially in the GCC landscape or MNC landscape, how would you, and given the penetration of Gen AI, in every product that is being sold, how do you see going forward what talent would mean, the ROI of talent? How do you think companies are going to sort of look at it?
Yeah, I think today the conversation is less about revenue per employee, right? I mean, that is not what at least some of the smartest organizations out there are doing. Of course, everybody wants to have it in the reports and all of that. But I think if you just step back a bit, today what we are hiring for is what kind of mindset do people bring? Do you have critical problem solving skills? Do you have the ability to look at, in a very critical way, look at data, analyze it, use that data in the right context? Do you have skills around design thinking? Because finally it boils down into the mindset of understanding what are we solving for, right? It's no more about, hey, who's the best one who can, because you can find enough people who is very much well versed on a particular piece of technology. That's less of our problem. But the smartest companies are the ones who will inculcate a culture of continuous learning, a mindset where you come with analytical thinking, problem solving, critically looking at how you can solve for the customer. And this is what we are looking for, right, in the talent. And this is how, and of course, today there are no metrics to measure on all of these skills because it's really around the edges, if you ask me. But definitely, this is how things are shaping up for the future because that's what's needed. Tomorrow, you'll find the next large language model that comes out. Are you going to go and hire people for that? I don't think so. But if you have smart people, they will pick up those skills. And today, I was just talking about it earlier on as well. Today, companies are hiring for skills rather than degrees. That change is already happening.
Sure. Also, Sindhu, with Gen AI and AI, the metrics of ROI, do you think the definition is going to change?
It depends on what you're solving. Sometimes it might, like, let's take an example like one of the pharmaceutical companies that we were working for, right? They're building a vaccine, right? And typically when you're building a vaccine, you have thousands of components that go into a vaccine. The same company was building the same vaccine. But today, with the technologies that exist, that pharmaceutical company can really look at what are equivalent components that can be sourced from a totally different region at a much lesser price point, exactly bringing in the same value that a component that you want to replace, because maybe your supply chain challenge does not allow you for getting that component. And today with generative AI, you're able to re-look at that same problem statement, but address it from and it's from a cost, from a time, from an efficiency. How quickly can you bring that vaccine out into the market? So there's different, and it again depends on what is the use case that you're solving? And then the measures against which you measure will also differ.
Sure. Sindhu, also we are seeing a lot of tech companies sort of collaborate with hyperscalers and chip makers. The synergies that you think the industry will draw, and eventually in, let's say, a 1-2 year time frame, how do you how do you think that this is going to translate on the entire tech industry, and what is a realistic expectation out of these collaborations?
And you said the key word, collaboration, right? Because as you go across the entire stack, right? I mean, you have the infrastructure, you have the layers in between, and you have the application layer, right? And again, everybody brings their core expertise to the table. And it's not that now everybody now needs to solve for the infrastructure, or everybody needs to build the next model, or everybody needs to build the next app. I think if we are really smart, we would kind of make sure that we have our individual kind of niche areas and work with partnerships, right? Because everybody has a place in that equation, unless you're building something which goes across the stack. But in most cases, we're building domain specific. And when you're building domain specific, what matters is that domain expertise. And then you take every other part of the stack. And today, honestly, some of these models are getting commoditized as we speak, right? It doesn't matter. So, and for that domain, you would pick and choose the model that you need to use for what you're trying to solve. So again, it's all about partnerships.
Do you think India needs its own LLM?
Well, we are already seeing Indic LLMs as we speak. I mean, if you just take an example like Sarvam.ai, I think the model is already trained on at least 12 or 13 of the top Indian languages. But again, I would think absolutely yes, because if you want to go into the length and breadth of the country, we're talking about at least 200 plus
Maybe
languages.
an open source and public infrastructure.
Again, yeah, but again, what we need is also the right infrastructure, and with the government's focus on also building out that infrastructure, we need to also make sure that the languages are trained in the language of choice of the end user in this particular case, and we are already seeing some phenomenal examples. Sarvam is one, Kritrim AI is another one, or if I look at Observe AI, right? So there are great examples, but we need to do it at scale.
One final question. What are the 3 things that you think agentic AI will be changing in the coming year?
Well, three things. I think first things first, agentic AI is here to stay. There's no doubt. We're already seeing how we are looking at something like the super agent kind of orchestrating and kind of handing off once a particular part of that process is completed. So for me, three things would be, again, agents will be domain specific. There's no question about it, because each agent, I was giving the example earlier on about, say, you're driving a marketing campaign at Fortune, for example, right? But you want to drive that marketing campaign with the right kind of legal frameworks that works at Fortune. So you would have two agents kind of working with each other, one who's an expert working with you from a marketing point of view, but at the same time you have another agent who's deep into the legal frameworks of what Fortune needs that every user works against, right? So domain specific agents is here to stay. There's no question about it. The second thing I would say is also going back into efficiency. Of course, agents will bring a lot of the efficiency, but we would see the users kind of moving up so that you can stay focused on what is it that you are trying to achieve, right? And not kind of go into every nitty-gritty detail of how you want to run that marketing campaign. So I would say the second thing is efficiency, which leads into more time that the end user can spend on much more relevant and much more focused kind of skills that only you can bring to the table. And the third piece I'd say is, again, agentic framework will also result in a lot around how do we manage the whole life cycle of these agents. And that is something that we cannot ignore, right? Because you need to have skills where you look at when the handing off of agents happen, how do we look at the life cycle of this? How do you bring this all together? So a lot of what I'm trying to say is lots of technology that will be built in orchestrating agents and how they work with each other. That is also definitely an area that will evolve.
Thank you so much for your time and the lovely conversation.
As always, thank you so much.